Hello and welcome to today's course. I'm Vincent, and today we're going to take a deep dive into Integration Designer macro steps. Macro steps are some of the most powerful and important tools available in Integration Designer. They help you solve real-world problems, handle stubborn or unpredictable devices, and ultimately, they'll create a smoother, more professional client experience. In this session, I'm going to break down each macro step, explain what it does, and walk you through when and why you would use it in the field. By the end, you'll understand how to use them effectively. Now, what I have here is a completely finished file, and I've put a lot of different devices separated into rooms, just for the purpose of showing you how to use the macro steps. Okay? I'm going to open up my workspace to expose all the different rooms, devices, controllers, and so on. I've added a source device called macro steps, and I have a couple of different RTI controllers with the same page, and I might alternate depending on the features that these projects support. Now let's talk a little bit about macro steps. Macro steps are, again, the tools we have in the software that can customize your programming, okay? So just like the software has custom capability in terms of customizing the user experience and the user interface, we do the same with macros. You could really fine-tune the way a device is if a device is behaving wrong or having some problems, you could deal with that pretty easily. And you can also do some pretty cool things. Now, how do you get to the macro steps? Here you can see I have them exposed here on the right side towards the bottom. But on the bottom right side, you'll see a bunch of tabs. Tag browser, macro steps, bitmaps. We're going to click on macro steps, and we're going to stay in here a lot throughout the class. Now I'm going to tour each macro step from top to bottom, explain the way each one works, and maybe even show you, go in depth, and show you specific examples. Let's start with the first macro step, command. Now, command is going to do just that, bring in commands, and you can customize it to any device you want. So let's select our button. Let's select a particular macro level, okay? And now let's bring in the command. Now, these macro steps can be brought into your buttons either by double-clicking or by dragging and dropping. So I could either double-click or I could drag and drop, okay? And so let's delete these and do it over. So a command is going to allow you to select a device from the dropdown. So I'll select my Blu-ray player, and then I can select a function from the dropdown. Now, sometimes when you select a function, you'll also be able to select an argument. Sometimes multiple arguments. Sometimes if you have multiple players or multiple devices, they'll allow you to select which one you want. So you can easily select whatever you want in this dropdown. If you change your mind, you could even change the command or the function or even the device itself. I could quickly change this to Roku and change the function. Okay? So command is pretty straightforward, like a lot of these are. Now there's another way of bringing in commands. Here you can see I brought in my launched my Netflix app with my Roku, but you could also go to the bottom of your macro steps, and here is a section called sources, which right now is kind of folded. Let's open this up. When you open it up, it will expose all the different devices in your project, and many of these are folded up when you first open it, okay? So you could pick a device, like my Roku, click the little arrow next to it, and now I could expose, at least for drivers, all the different categories. For drivers, we usually categorize them because of the amount of commands you'll find in a driver. If it's an IR device, you'll usually find a drop-down of all the commands in alphabetical order. But in this case, I can go and select a particular channel. I could open up the launch channel and then bring in launch by name. And so, two different ways of doing it. I prefer to bring in commands when I can help it, normally when I'm programming, but this is a good way to tour a specific device unfold each menu, kind of see what's under the hood. So whatever you prefer, you can do. I'm going to fold this up for now. Okay? Now to delete what's in your macro window, in the macro window, there's a bunch of different icons in the macro toolbar. This icon over here with the little X through it will allow you to delete all your macro steps. So I'm going to double click that and delete all of them. Okay? All right. Let's go for the next macro step called button pause. Now, button pause, as I bring it in, is kind of like one of those macro steps that you're going to use to solve a problem. I don't know how common this is these days, and a lot of these macro steps have been around for a long time. But what the button pause step does is it causes the macro to stop executing until the button it is attached to is released, at which time the rest of the macro is executed. Now, that's a big mouthful, but I have a personal experience with this. Back when I had a TiVo, with the fast forward or the scan forward, it would kind of force you to hold it down. And the only way to stop it from fast forwarding was to hit play. So I would hold it down and frantically have to find the play button on my remote and kind of time it perfectly. Now with the button pause, you can now execute that play command, fast forward command, or scan command. And then once you let go of it, it will run the rest. So how do you build this? Well, here's my button pause. Let's pretend my Blu-ray device has this problem. And again, many devices don't have this problem anymore. I'm going to go to my controls, transports, and I'm going to pick my scan forward. Now let's pretend this scan forward requires you to continuously keep sending it until you're done. And at that much time, you have to select play to get to where you want. Well, I'm going to bring this up above my button pause. And now directly below the button pause, as I bring in another command, you can select the play command. Okay, so what this will do is continuously keep sending this scan forward until the button is released, and then the play command will execute. So you may have problems with this, or you might find creative uses for it, but that's the button pause, as common or uncommon as it may seem. I'm going to delete this command as well. Okay, let's go over the next command, time delay. Now, we all probably know what this does, but I'm going to go over it anyway, just in case you're just starting out. In situations where you have a command like this, let's say you're turning on a TV, and then maybe you're switching an input, okay? So let's turn on the TV in the bar, and then let's switch the input in the bar to HDMI 1. Now, a lot of times, televisions or devices take some time to warm up before they can accept the command, like an input switch. So what you could use is a delay. So my time delay function, if I bring it in, this will redefault to 0.3 of a second or whatever the last delay you used. Either or. If you never used it before, 0.3 of a second. Or it'll default to whatever you used last. And now I'm going to bring this up, and now I'm going to change this delay to whatever time in seconds that it takes for the TV to warm up. Let's say the TV takes 7.5 seconds. So that will send the power command. It will delay 7.5 seconds and then send the HDMI 1 input when the TV is finally done powering on. Now, you might have to time the device and see how long it takes. And, sometimes if your command's not going through, it could be because the TV is just not ready yet. So if you have to jack this up a little, you could either use the arrow or you can just type in the amount, the duration in here. I'm going to make this 8.7, and that could be precise. Okay? So that's our time delay. Now, the only issue with a time delay, and we'll go over this a little later when we start going over some of the other features, is that this will tie up your screen. This particular command will tie up your screen for 8.7 seconds. Not exactly a great client experience, So many times you might want to do a please wait page or something like that. So the client knows that the screen is actually doing something and he shouldn't press anything. Okay. So that's just some advice there. I'm going to delete this and move on to the next one. Okay. Now toggle IR code is the next command. And toggle IR code is kind of like another way of dealing with stubborn devices. Unfortunately, this one is a little more common than I'd like to think. Many devices in the market use something called a toggle IR code. And to show you one as an example, I'm going to go to my Add Workspace item, and I'm going to add a device that has this kind of a feature. Select infrared, because that's the only type of device that has this feature. And I'm going to search for a Cisco. Let's search for a Star Hub. Now, when you preview the IR codes, these are going to look kind of strange to you. You're going to see each command doubled up, and each command is going to have a regular command and toggle equals 1. Okay? What does that mean, and why does this happen? Certain manufacturers, in order to avoid problems, add another dialect to the command, requiring you to select it, to toggle it in order to select it. So for example, when you press this let me add this to the device. Let me add it to my global area. Let's call it toggle cable box. Let's assign a port to it. Okay. And I'm not going to create any pages because I just want to show you the command itself. Now, with this command, as I go to my macro steps field, you're going to want to, if I expose all the commands here, you're going to want to double these up when you're sending a device. Unfortunately, if you're sending a menu command and you just do something like this, this will work the first time, but when you press it again, it's not really going to work because there's another dialect built into the command. It's a toggle bit code. Okay? Why do manufacturers do this? Well, most of the time it's to avoid signal reflection or accidental button presses. Okay? So what this requires you to do is send this first one and then toggle it the next time to this one and then back to the first one and so on and so forth. Now you can't do that this way. This is just going to send menu main and menu main t equals 1. Not exactly what you want to accomplish. So you have to use the toggle bit IR code command. And you bring this in, and inside the brackets between the toggle IR code and end, you're going to put these two commands. It's important you put t equals 1 in the second press. So what this will do is toggle between these two codes, and now the device will behave right. A lot of people learn in codes with our IR learner, but if the device supports toggle codes, they'll act strange. They'll work very sporadically. So if you ever come across that, it probably has toggle codes. If our database doesn't have it, reach out to us and we can research it. Or if you're learning something and it's behaving strangely, well, it's because of toggle codes. Many devices in the market have this. Cable boxes are pretty notorious. So toggle codes are meant to help, but with a control system, they can cause more than their share of problems. Obviously, on the factory remotes, these are already built in. So that's the toggle code. Now, if you don't want to solve problems, let's say the client wants to toggle between two commands. Let's say inputs. So I'll bring in an input here. I'll bring in HDMI 1, and I'll just double it up by holding down the control key while I drag down the command where it says command, and I'll make this HDMI 2. This will toggle between HDMI 1 and 2. So if you ever have to toggle between two commands, you could also use it this way. It will not toggle between more than two commands. So again, just here for your convenience, but mostly to deal with toggle bit codes, which are a little bit painful, but we have an answer. Okay, I'm going to delete those and move on to the next one. Stop macro. Now, stop macro does just that. It stops a macro. So let's say you have a really long macro. I'll power this on. I'll switch an input. I'll send a command to play. And then I'll go to other commands here. Maybe go to my satellite. Do a channel up command. Go here, send a one command. Let's pretend this is a workaround for a device and much longer than this. What your stop macro is designed to do is stop the macro wherever you place this. So maybe if you stop it here, it'll only run those first two steps. Why is this useful? Well, sometimes you're troubleshooting something. For example, let's say you set a flag, which we'll go over later, and you're setting it here, okay? Let's set a flag here. Well, that flag is having problems, so you could stop your macro in the middle so you don't have to wait for this all to finish, especially if you have delays or a long routine. Another thing you can do is an if-else statement, and we'll show you how to do those a little later, but you could do something like, if this is true, if this variable is true, do this, else just stop the macro right there and don't continue. So if you have a use for it, you could definitely use that stop macro command. Mostly used for troubleshooting. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is page link. We probably should have labeled this soft page link because that's what it does. Let's double click this. Now a soft page link is included inside a macro. So if I put a page link in here, I could select a device. Let's say I want to jump to my projector page on whatever controller is calling this, okay? And now this is part of this macro level. And now if I click on my IST10, well, that'll be programmed there also because it's the same tag and same source because it's a source level, and here too. That is known as a soft page link, okay? And that's not controller specific. So if you put that on a button with a tag, macro steps, on a macro level, source macro, that macro will feed through to this source on all the controllers controlling this source. In this case, I have 3. Now, what if you wanted all of them to behave differently? Now, it's not really a macro step, but what you could use is a hard page link. Let's say on this controller, I didn't want this controller to jump to this page. Let's say on this controller, let's delete this. I want it to jump to another page, but I don't want the other two to jump, okay? And let's say I had some commands in here. Like let's just say I also had a command here to turn on my TV and so on and so forth. But after it turns on, I want it to jump to a specific page, but I want to jump to different pages on the other controllers. Well, then you can use a hard page link. A hard page link is available in the tag editor under page link. Simply select your device. I'll select, in this case, my Roku, and then select the page or the first page. It'll jump to the first page. Now, another advantage of using a hard page link is that you can jump to a specific page. You can't do that with this soft page link. But now if I go to my other controllers, notice that those don't inherit that page link because those might be designed differently. They might have more than one page or less than 3 pages, okay? So this is a hard page link and a soft page link. Now, something to know. If you put a time delay here, let's say 8.7 seconds, and then you send that familiar input command, with a hard page link, it will not wait for this macro to finish. It will immediately jump to your Roku. So just keep that in mind. Whereas if you put a page link on it and you jump to your Roku or whatever device, I'll just jump to my Roku. Okay. This will wait the 8.7 seconds. However, if you have both a soft and hard page link, the hard page link will immediately jump to your Roku. And then while this is running 8.7 seconds later, it will jump again to the same page or a different page using this link. So just understand the difference. Okay, I'm going to remove both. I don't want to have a hard page link on my button, nor do I want to have a command. And that's the page link used to jump to a specific page. Let's talk about repeat steps. Okay, repeat steps. And every time you see something with an end, you know that you have to put commands in the brackets or in between these two statements to work properly. And what repeat steps does is it will repeat a command until the button is released or a certain number of times. Okay? Let's do until button is released. When would you use this? Well, let's talk about serial commands. Let's delete this toggle database code. I'm going to go back to my add workspace, and I'm going to go to my RS-232 library. Okay? This is all my one-way RS-232 codes. And I'm going to bring in let's bring in something that has a definite volume. Let's bring in this RCAM AVR. Okay? I'm going to bring that in my global area. For now, I'm just going to call this RCAM, and I'm going to call this repeat steps, so we know why we're using this. And you could use either a CM232 on one of your ports, one of your multi-purpose I/O ports, or you could use one of the two-way ports on your processor, okay? Even though you won't get two-way feedback. Okay, let's add this device. Now, the problem with this device, like many serial devices, even some IP devices, is that the volume, and maybe some other commands, won't ramp as you press and hold them. So, you know, when music is really low or your show is really low and you want to get your volume up there, you hold down that volume command and you expect it to ramp. However, if it doesn't ramp, it could mean that it either can't or you need to treat it with a repeat steps. So now what I'm going to do is bring in that command in the middle, select that RCAM repeat steps, and I'm going to look for that volume function. Usually those are on top. Let's select that volume function, mute, unmute, zone 1 volume up, and we could pick, okay, there you go. And that will continuously send the volume until you release the button, okay? And that's a really cool command, okay? Another thing you can do is send the command a number of times. So instead of doing something like this, let's say you have a workaround on your Roku to select a specific app. Well, Roku's a bad example. Let's do another device. Let's say you had a command on your Blu-ray player or satellite box to perform a specific function. Let's say cursor up, cursor up, okay, and then enter. Okay, now if you have this command, instead of doing all these, what you can do is use repeat steps, okay? And what repeat steps does is that it sends that command multiple times. So let's do this in action. Let's bring in a repeat steps. And let's, instead of sending that 3 times, let's just send it. Let's send it 3 times. Get rid of these 2. And then once that's finished, it'll click select. Okay? Maybe not the best example in the world, but you can use that to send a command a number of times. A little bit better than continuously pressing. Okay? So that'll solve some problems in the field, or some it won't. Okay? All right, so there you go. That's repeat steps. Now let's talk about status test. That's the next macro step. Now our processors, at least many of them, have built-in sense inputs. And in many cases, they have also multi-purpose I/O ports. An XP3 has one multi-purpose I/O port. I'm currently using an XP6S in this installation, and that has 6 multi-purpose I/O ports. There's also 3 sense inputs built in to the XP6S. Now, a status test, well, let's continue on the multi-purpose I/O ports. With a multi-purpose I/O port, normally you can plug in an emitter or a CM232 RS232 module for one-way serial control, okay? Or you can plug in a VPS1 voltage sensor. And when those are spliced into a television, you can detect whether that USB, because you're going to splice it into a USB connection. And normally, since TVs turn off their USB when they're off, and if the TV doesn't have discrete power, you can test if that TV's on and off by using a status test. And you'll use one of the multi-purpose I/O ports. Or your sense input, maybe it's run to a garage door contact or a gate. You can detect if it's high or low. High meaning a signal is detected, low meaning it's open and not detected. So I'm going to bring in a status test, and now I can detect if any of my multi-purpose I/O ports are true, meaning maybe a voltage sensor is detecting some signal, let's say multi-purpose I/O port 2. Ideally, these double up as emitter ports also. So you can plug in an emitter into the voltage sensor as well. And now you could determine if you're receiving a current. If it's on, do this, else do that. Okay? So, or you could use one of the sense inputs. You have 3 available. So if let's say the sense input is on, and you could name these under the processor, under properties, under port. Just select the dropdown. Let's select our sense. Let's pretend we're running our sense port to a gate to detect if it's closed or open. Okay? Now I can go to my button here again, and I can say, if my gate is on, it's open, well, let's close it. Okay? So sense, that's a status test. You could detect voltage with a voltage sensor connected to a multi-purpose I/O port, or if a sense port goes high or low. Okay? Let's talk about sounds. That's going to be the next lesson. So you can play sounds. Let's bring in the play sound feature. Okay? Now with the play sound, normally this will play a sound that you store in the controller properties. There's 50 sound banks that you can use to create sounds, and then they'll be available, as you can see, within a macro. So maybe when your client arms his security system, you'll make that familiar chirp. Or when he locks his front door, a sound will indicate that that door is locked. Okay? So what you could do if you don't have any sound stored is add one. Now, we do include on intercom-ready controllers ringtones. So this controller, the IST10, has a controller ringtone, so it will ring when someone's calling the station, or it will have a notification sound, like a little boop, 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 and you could use that when you pop up a warning or something like that. Now, to add a sound to a sound bank, click on the controller. Let's open up everything here. Let's click on the controller in the workspace, IST10. Then click on Properties, and you'll have a Sound tab. Okay? You could change the sound volume. You can change the default button press to a specific sound. Here are the 50 sound banks. Now, if you don't have any sound effects, don't worry. We give you a few. If you double-click on that first sound bank, we give you a bicycle bell, a hotel bell ding, and you could preview these sounds. I don't know if my microphone is picking these up, but you could preview these just by pressing these, okay? So let's say I wanted to add one to a sound bank, maybe a mouse click. I could add that. And I could add a bunch. I could go to my second sound bank, add the bicycle bell. Now, if you have your own sound effects, you could browse for sound files. Just navigate to where you store your sound files. I think I might have one on my NAS drive somewhere, and then you could find one. I don't want to go to that now. And then you could preview by either playing it, you could remove it, and so on. But now that sound will be available in your macro step section. Okay, so sound effects. I don't recommend using these a lot. They can annoy people more than they can help. But if your client is visually impaired or he just wants that satisfaction when maybe a warning sound or a pop-up sound so he knows that something popped up on his controller, now I could go over and walk over to it and look. Definitely a good idea. Okay? Sounds. Let's talk about relay and trigger control. So, in order to use relays, you have to, well, our processor here has 3 relays and 3 triggers, okay? So the way you do that is you go into your processor properties again, go click on properties, click on port names, and from the dropdown this time, select relay. Now you're going to get 3 relays, okay? Think of a relay like pushing a button to complete a circuit, like a garage door, gate, fireplace switch, or a projector screen, okay? And you've got triggers. Think of those like sending 12 volts to turn on something. You could turn on an amplifier, a power conditioner, or even a screen mechanism, okay? So you have to name these to use them. So you could see I named one garage door, and now I could use it on my interface. So bring in your relay, select your relay like my garage door, okay? Now with a relay, you can open or close the garage door or use a trigger depending on how you wired it, okay? On or close means you close the relay and therefore you basically can complete the circuit. With a trigger, on means you're sending that trigger. Off means you're not sending the trigger, okay? You stop sending the trigger. And toggle, you can toggle between the two. Again, relays are great for any kind of situation where you need a switch kinding mechanism, okay? Just read the processor specs for what you need to know in terms of electrical currents and all that stuff, okay? All right, call macro. We could have another course on this feature. In fact, I think we have one planned. But what a call macro does is just that. It calls a macro. Now, why would you use this feature? For a few reasons, okay? This might be used to send a specific command that you normally don't have access to in this room. Let's say on my ISR2, that's a better example. Since my ISR2 is only available in the family room, okay? Here's my ISR2. Click macro steps, okay? I'm only going to have access, if I bring in a command here, to the devices that are available either in global or in my family room, not other devices in other room, okay? So what I can do to get this to work is, let's say I want to control my TV that's in another room. Well, I can use the call macro feature. Bring in the call macro, select the room the device is in, let's say kitchen, select the source that you want to control. I don't have a TV in this room, so let's try another room. Let's say bar. Let's select the TV and then select the macro you want to run. Now, if you don't have macros available, that means there's no page for the TV, so nothing was auto-programmed. Now, you have 2 choices. You could either add a page, but that's not desirable because you didn't add one in the first place, or you could create a macro on the processor for that TV. All you have to do is click on that bar TV in the project file. So make sure you're in the bar. Here's the bar. Select the TV. And now you can select macro list. Okay, no macros are available because there's no pages available. Once I add a page and it auto programs a lot of things, you'll see this fill up. In fact, if I go to a device that has some things built, like maybe the security system, and click macro list, you're going to see a lot of macros programmed because that security system has a page. But getting back to my TV, let's add a command here called power on. And now let's notice we'll only be able to program a source level because the TV is a source. Bring in a command, bar TV, power on, okay? And now, if I go back to my family room on that local controller that otherwise don't have access, where am I here? Macro steps, that otherwise doesn't have access to other room control, right? Now I can select that power on command, okay? Now, call macros also have other great uses. What if I wanted to turn on the TV in the bar from the family room? Because I want to go downstairs where the bar is in a few minutes and enjoy the bar, okay? Let's say the TV takes 15 seconds to warm up. Let's say that TV was a projector or something. I'll bring in a time delay. There may be 32 seconds. Let's pretend it's a projector. Maybe that switch is an input. Right? So let's select that TV. It won't be available here because we're in a different room. So we'd have to create the input command also. But the problem with this command, let's just use the regular command for the regular TV in this room. Let's switch the input. Where's that discrete inputs? Here it is, HDMI 1. Okay, the problem with this command, and most projectors are going to be like this, is that this command takes 32 seconds to warm up. Let's pretend we'll put a little trigger in there to send an on command to bring the screen down, okay? The problem with this routine is that your screen is tied up for 32 seconds. And you don't want to put a please wait page. You don't want to go through that trouble. What can you do to deal with this using the call macro feature? Well, what you can do is now let's go to that TV in the family room, click it, and now click on macro list. Add that input. So I'm going to go TV input. Well, I'll call it projector input because we're pretending this is a projector. And then just switch the input here. So let's go to our commands. TV, HDMI 1. Now getting back to our macro, how does the call macro feature play in? Let's delete that. Okay. What can we do here to deal with that call macro feature? What we can do is bring in, instead of doing the 32-second wait, let's get rid of that. And instead of sending the HDMI 1 command, we could bring in the call macro command. What room is it in? It's in the room we're in, the family room. What source is it? It's on the projector. What's the macro? Projector input. Now, if you just run this, these will all run in succession, which is not going to be good because remember, this takes 32 seconds. How do I delay this call macro from running? Well, call macros have a delay feature. If I open up the call macro here by clicking the plus sign, there is a schedule mode available. Always going to be immediately run by default. But I could delay this. And I could delay this for 32 seconds. So it's not going to run that projector input for 32 seconds. Now, what about tying up my screen? When you schedule a macro, it dishes it off on another macro engine. Our processors have multiple macro engines. So it will return your screen back as soon as the projector turns on and the projector screen comes down or it starts coming down. It'll immediately now schedule this macro on another processor engine and return your screen back. 32 seconds later, you'll be able to get the command switched. But in the meantime, you can go and set lights, change your climate, get yourself comfortable in your room. So call macro is a really powerful feature. We're going to go more in depth on the call macro feature in a separate training. A lot of these have so many features that they'll probably require a separate training. Okay, next up, flags. Flags are another powerful feature that we could probably go into its own lesson. In fact, we probably might do that as well. That's the flag statement. Now, there's two commands that are going to correspond to flags. Flags, and then a check to see if that flag is set. What is a flag? Now, I want you to understand flags as kind of like a memory switch inside the processor. Think of it like a switch that you could either turn on or off and then test to see if that switch is set. So let's give you a more layman example. In my home, my office door, I close my door usually, so I don't disturb anyone else in the house if they're home. But mostly, I close the door when I'm in meetings. Now, sometimes my door is not closed and I'm not in a meeting. So how do I prevent people from just opening my door while I'm in a meeting and kind of like disturbing me? Well, what I could do is I could have a little switch in my desk that when I press, maybe lights up a little light outside that means I'm busy. I want you to think of that like flags. Think of flags like a switch that you could turn on and off to mean something useful. And then when my wife or my daughter sees that switch is on, they know I'm in a meeting and they know I'm not available right now for whatever they need, okay? So flags work the same way. Now, I also want you to understand something else about that switch. Does that switch, when it's on, always mean I'm in a meeting? What if I forget to close it and now I'm not in a meeting? So that switch isn't 100% reliable, but it definitely helps more than it hurts, right? So flags can be used to solve problems, but they're not always a perfect science because you're setting or clearing the flag or turning off and on the switch in the project, okay? Let's show you how this works, okay? I'm going to click on my ISD10 for this one. Click on this command right here. I'm going to delete all these, okay? And what I'm going to do is bring in a couple of commands to show you a common problem. I'm going to select my Scientific Atlanta cable box, and I'm going to select my power toggle because there's no on and off. And I'm going to label this button for now, watch cable. And I'm just going to probably turn on my TV also. TV bar or whatever TV I'm in, power on. Now, what you see on the interface right now are two completely different command types. One is a discrete code, power on, definitely power on my TV. The other, power toggle, is a non-discrete code. And what happens when I press this the first time? This is going to work nicely. My TV's off, so it's going to turn on. And my cable box is off, so this power toggle will do the right thing. However, what if I go out of this cable activity, maybe select a few lighting scenes, maybe adjust my thermostat, and now I press this again? Well, my TV's already on, so sending another power on command isn't going to hurt, so nothing will happen there. But when it gets to this power toggle, now my cable box is on, and now this power toggle is going to turn it off on me. Not a great thing, okay? So what can I use to kind of track when I send this power toggle to turn on the TV? Maybe I could flip one of those switches in the processor to an on state to coincide to that power toggle. And then maybe I can, well, before I send that power toggle, I can evaluate if that switch is on or off, just like my wife and daughter do with the light outside my office. Okay? So what we can use are flags. Okay? Now I'm going to select that little red flag in my macro window here, and I'm going to just pick one of these flags. I'll pick flag 10, okay? We give you 256 of these switches on the processor that you could either flip to an on or off state. However, we don't call it on and off. We call it cleared or set. Cleared meaning off, set meaning on, okay? So I'm going to go to flag, let's go to flag 10. I like to reserve the first few for other stuff. And now I'm going to name the flag by its use. What am I using it for? To track cable power. Cable power toggle. That's what I'm using it for. Click OK. Okay? And now what I'm going to do before I send this power toggle, I'm going to evaluate if anyone flipped that switch. Okay? So I'm going to bring in my if flag is set statement directly above the cable power toggle. Okay? Now, if that flag is set, that means that switch was turned to on. What do I want to do if that flag is set? That means the cable box is already on. So I don't want to send this power toggle if that switch is already on. So I'm going to bring the command power toggle to the else side of the check. So if that flag is set, meaning that switch was flipped and turned to on, don't do anything. Else, well, then power toggle because you have to turn it on. Now, the only thing left to do is flip the switch to let the system know that the cable box has been turned on, and therefore flip this switch so the next time it knows that that switch has been flipped. So bring in the flag this time. And now we don't want to clear the flag. We want to set it and pick the flag that you need. Cable power toggle. Now, when you run this, it's going to turn on the TV. It's going to check, did anyone flip the cable power? No, no one did. So it's going to go to the else side. Power toggle, which will turn it on. And now this will flip that switch to the on state. That switch will be cleared by the default state, alerting the system that the cable power is on. Okay, so I'm watching cable. Now I go outside the activity, adjust some lights, adjust some climate, maybe turn my shades up. And now when I run this again, my TV's already on. Okay, that'll turn it on. It's already on, so that doesn't matter. But when it gets to my flag statement, it's going to say, hey, did anyone set the flag cable power? And it's going to run whatever's in the middle here. I'll put a little time delay as a little contrast, maybe 0.3 seconds. And now it'll do that delay and then jump out and continue on. It will not send the power toggle. Now, if you have this, what you also need is on your power off, you need to turn that switch off when you turn off the cable box. Okay? So let's change the tag to power off system. Let's copy this entire macro by clicking just to the left here, holding down the shift key and selecting copy, which will copy the entire contents into power off. And this time we got to make a few changes. First, we want to turn off the TV. Now, if the flag is set, what do we want to do? We don't want to do anything. We want to power toggle this cable box off. And now we also want to turn that switch off or clear that switch. So it will clear the flag. And now we'll put the time delay on the other side. So now we're watching cable. We hit power off. It'll turn off the TV. It'll ask, hey, did anyone set the flag? Yes, this button set the flag. So it will send a power toggle to turn off the cable box, clear the flag so this will work properly next time. And or else if the cable box was never turned on, it won't do anything. It'll leave it alone. That is a good way of tracking discrete power. Now, it's not 100% reliable. Let's get that out there, right? If someone turns, in my office, remember my example? That switch might be on, but what if I have a power outage? Now that switch is off, but I'm in a meeting, or maybe I'm on the phone or something. Okay. A phone meeting. Okay. So, or what if I accidentally forget to turn that switch off? And now my poor family can't talk to me because I've been in a meeting all day. So these aren't 100% reliable. You have to be very careful of how you set and clear flags in the programming, but you also have to be careful about when this goes off track due to power outages or something like that. So educate your client, give him like a button on his screen that maybe does something like this on his cable interface, maybe just a power command that just has nothing else but this. And just tell him, if you see a black screen when you go to the cable, just press this button so it'll power the cable box on in case it gets off track. Now it's on track again and life is good. So it'll work most of the time. You could use flags for many other reasons. A lot of cool programming examples. We'll go over that in a separate training. Okay, let's get rid of this. Let's clean up everything. Let's move this back here. Let's clean this out. And let's get rid of that text. Let's go over the next command called comment. Comment is like any other programming languages. You could put comments in your macros. So if you have a long, complicated macro, I'll go to my sources here and I'll just bring in a few things, just copy some things in and bring in some commands. Sometimes in your programming, you might want to put some comments in. If you put a comment in the middle here and says, this step does this, and describe it, maybe put another comment, maybe some stars to kind of separate. Okay, you could do something like that. So a lot of times when someone gives me a project file and they're asking me a question, I'll put comments in and the programming will just ignore it. Okay, so if you have a good use for comments, maybe you're starting out, maybe you're doing that flag test, you could always put, hey, this is where the flag is cleared because the system is off, and this is where the flag is set because the cable box has been turned on. Pretty simple, not too much explanation required there. All right, let's move on to the next one, time range test. Now for my time range test, I'm going to go to my KP2 because this is a real world example. I've got a KP2 in my kitchen and in my house too. And this is exactly what my KP2 does. Maybe not exactly, but pretty similar. There's just two buttons. The lights on, turns on the lights in my kitchen. The lights off, turns them off. Life is good. Now, my wife works Monday through Friday, and she's usually getting ready and usually doing things in the kitchen between 7 and 8. Usually leaves around 5 after 8. Okay? So, she came to me and she said, can you make this button not only turn on the lights, but can you also make it do something else, but only between the times I get ready for work? Well, that's a time range test. Let's show you how it works. Bring in the time range test. Now with time range tests, you can use either a specific fixed times, or you could say if it's 30 minutes before sunset on Monday through, 45 minutes after sunset on Wednesday. You could do something like that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. That's good for like maybe a button that makes sure that lights are off on a certain time or lights are on when it's dusk outside or something like that. But let's do this for my example. My wife wants let's make this, leave the user specific time. My wife wants between 7 a.m. Monday and through the weekdays, through Friday, let's make this use specific time again, through 8 a.m. on Friday. And this doesn't mean through, it means Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday between 7 and 8 a.m. If it's between those times, yes, I have to set my writing level. That I always have to do. But she also wants me bring in a command. Let's turn on the audio distribution system. Let's turn on the kitchen. Let's also, with that same audio distribution system, let's select that input. Kitchen, select input, Sonos. And now she also wants to play, using the Sonos, her particular playlist. So I'm going to find this one. I'm going to go to play, select playlist from list. And I'm going to pick the Sonos player. I only have one. And I'm going to pick the player number on the list. It starts from 0. So if your first favorite is 0, we only have one, so I'll leave it on 0. Okay? That'll be the first favorite in the list. And now, if it's between those times, it will turn on and I'll even go and set a particular volume on my audio distribution system. Oops. Screwed that one up. She wants to listen to it at a certain volume because it's early in the morning. Set volume, let's set it to 45. Okay? But what if it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday between 7 and 8 a.m.? What else? What should it do on the else side? Well, I'm going to make a copy by holding down my control key and dragging that lighting command down. And now that will just turn on the lights if it's any other time. Time range test. Really cool. Lots of great case uses. And of course, on lights off, you probably want to do something similar, but lights off, you just turn off the lights. But if it's between maybe a little bit of a longer time, you want to turn off that Sonos. So when she leaves, it takes care of this. Okay? All right. Go back to my macro steps on my controllers. And let's look at the next one, event control. Now, event control allows you to give your client event control. Let's do an example. I'm going to click on my processor. That's where my processor events are located, at least here in my processor configuration. And I'm going to click on events. And I'm going to create a new event. Now, we have lots of different events. We have sense events when that sense input goes high or low. So if somebody opens the garage or opens the gate, a periodic event, which runs every few seconds or minutes, depending on what time interview you set and what macro you put, and then daily event. There's also a startup event that runs every time the processor starts up. Maybe a system recovery from a synchronization or power outage. But I'm going to use the daily event because my client wants to have peace of mind that every day, well, let's do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, not Friday and Saturday. He wants to run an event. Now, I didn't create the event yet, so let's do that now. I'm going to click on the global area. Why global? Because this doesn't have anything to do with a room or a specific source. It has to do with the overall property. So it's global. And I'm going to click on macro list. And now I'm going to create a macro called secure the home. And this is going to do everything it needs to do to secure the home. Whatever gives the client a peace of mind. In my case, it's going to first and foremost make sure the system is armed. Okay? It might also do something like make sure all my lights are closed. So you'll bring in a command to make sure your lighting control all off scene is set, whatever that is. Okay? Maybe it also locks a door. I don't have that in my system, so I'll use a comment. Maybe it locks the front door. Maybe it uses a relay to close the garage door. Okay? Whatever gives him the peace of mind to secure his home. Now we want that to run, right? Let's go back to our processor events. We want this to run on weekdays, right? At 12:30, let's get this to AM. Let's click the letter A. Okay? Now, where is that macro we just created? What room is it in? Well, it's not really in a room, it's in global. Is it a source in global? No, so skip that and select the macro we created. Secure the home and click OK. Now, you might want to put a little description. This secures the home weekdays or business, whatever it is. Okay? Now, the problem with this, if we look at this again, is that this is going to run definitively Saturday through Thursday. Definitively. What happens if it's Super Bowl Sunday and we're having some people over? Or if it's Labor Day and we want to be a little late on Sunday? Or if Tuesday falls on Christmas Eve and we're having people over and they stay a little late? We don't want this stuff to happen where all the lights shut off and everything turns off. You know, at 12:30 a.m. when people are still over, we still have company or we're still, cleaning up or whatever. So you got to give your client some type of event control. That's what the event control and if event enables for. Let's show you how to do that. Let's pretend this is the event control screen and you want to ideally give them two buttons, one that turns on the event, turn off event, and one that turns it off to get it back on the rails. Okay? So this button right here will enable weekdays. And this function over here will disable weekdays. Okay? Turn on event, turn off event. Okay, this is right. So you want to give him this event control page because now he knows tonight he's going to be a little late or it's getting late. He knows that 12:30 a.m. is not acceptable. This, if you use the event field, will either disable, enable, or toggle. We want to disable it on that function. So now he's got people over. Now it's 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Before he goes to bed or anytime thereafter, he can now, I do have this backward. Let's enable this event here and let's disable it here. And then I'll explain. I apologize. Okay. So he knows it's becoming late now. People are still over. It's 11:30 and he knows people are going to be over, or at least his family's still going to be around the house at 12:30. So what he could do is disable the event. And this will disable the event. Okay? And now, after that 12:30 time, anytime after that 12:30, the next day, the next morning, even after the next minute, 12:31, he could put the event back on the rails so that the next Monday, Tuesday, and then the next weekday that happens, as long as it matches that event map, that will run on time again. Okay? Event control. Or he could turn it off for an entire week. Maybe he's off from work, he's having company over. It's up to him. But now he has a way of controlling the event. Now, maybe you only want to give him one button. Okay? You could give him one button using if event enabled. Pick the event. And now if it's enabled, you can disable it. And if it's not enabled, you can enable it. So you have something to test the event as well. Okay? So that's event control. Pretty popular feature. Whenever you create those passive events for the client, you always want to make sure that they have some kind of event control. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's relabel this macro steps. Let's center this back. Let's delete that text. All right, the next macro step I want to show you is system variable test, okay? And a system variable test, if you're lucky enough to have a driver in your system, and let's talk about drivers. One of the great advantages of drivers is that besides giving you a lot of comprehensive control and you have two-way feedback and you can communicate with IP or serial, sometimes both, is that the processor is constantly polling these devices and updating all these different statuses. All these little switches inside are happening automatically, right? Unlike flags, which require you to set or clear, these system variable tests are set and cleared by the processor. So if the TV is on, if you have a driver for it, it will set that system variable to on or that variable to on. So what would you want? What if you have something like this? What if you have that TV in the bar that requires that 8-second delay before it sends that input command? I don't want to, the first time the client presses this, it's fine because he has to wait 8 seconds, but I don't want him to keep having to press this and wait 8 seconds. This will also tie up your screen for 8 seconds. I only want this to run the first time. But because I don't need flags, because I have a system variable for this TV, I can go and bring a system variable test. And now I can test that variable. What variable do I want to test from the bar? The power variable or the power on variable. Okay? And if that power on variable is true, that means the TV is indeed on. Okay? So I don't want to do anything there. Else, it's not on. I want to send the power on and send that delay in there. So that will only run if the TV's off. Pretty cool. And if you have a driver, you could test all sorts of system variables. On my Roku, I can test if a favorite's being used or if the screensaver's on. Not a great example. For my satellite box, I can test if the power is true, if the thing is playing, and so on and so forth. Music streamers, a lot of different variables you can test. Okay? And that's system variable test. A lot more powerful than just that little segment, but it is pretty simple. Let's talk about Find My Remote, which just became a little more popular due to the ISR family of devices. Now, the ISR family of devices consists of the ISR2, which is the 2.8-inch touchscreen, Wi-Fi based controller. We have a 4-inch version minus a keypad, a numeric keypad, which the ISR2 has. But the ISR4 is a little bit bigger touchscreen, 4 inches. Okay. And there's also the ISR-AB. That's a dock. Now, the dock has, besides being a Wi-Fi or wired access point, has the ability to send actual commands. It's a scene controller. And there's 4 buttons that are on that dock that can program anything. One of them is really used for Find the Remote because it's got a little icon on it. So you could use Find Remote to find any applicable remote that supports this feature. So if I want to find my ISR2, maybe someone took it into another room, it'll start beeping. Maybe it's under the couch cushion. Maybe it's in the back of the theater, okay? Instead of having to make a trip upstairs, especially if you're roaming around with these. And now your remote will start beeping. The remotes that support this are the ISR and Surf remotes, okay? So Find Remote. Pretty simple to use. All right, the rest, well, most of the rest are going to be system manager commands. I'm going to go over these a little quickly because we do cover a lot of this in our other trainings, but I'm going to try to go into as much detail as I can. Select room. So I can select a room from the dropdown, and this will tell whatever controller you're using that now the basement is indeed selected. And now you could do things like pop up the menus for the basement. It'll point to the volume for that basement, and so on and so forth. This is automatically built into our templates when you drag the room selection tags over to a button. So if I drag this tag over to select the bar, now that tag changes to room:bar, it'll program a select room bar and program a reverse state. So it'll show the reverse state when the bar is selected. Okay. I'm going to rename this to macro steps. So select room. Select activity is going to tell System Manager whatever the current room selected is. You don't even have to put a room name in. What activity to run. So let's say I want to run the Roku activity in global for this room, whatever room selected. Let's say the bar is selected. What this will do is start running all the selection events for the Roku in the bar. The please wait, the turning on the AVR or anything like that, turning on the TV, turning on the Roku, switching inputs, and then finally jumping to the Roku page. Okay? All the macros are centralized, and that command tells the system to run that activity through System Manager. Okay? Now, another thing you can do is drag a tag over. If I drag the tag over, let's say I delete this command, and I drag a tag over for Roku, these are in alphabetical order, activity Roku, and drag that over, this will program the same thing. Select activity for whatever current room is selected, run the global Roku. And that will run all the selection events in a centralized location via System Manager. Pretty cool. Sorry, I'm going to rename this. Okay, so that's that one. That is the select activity. Now, room off is going to, you don't have to hard code a room either. Oops, I didn't mean to kick the plus sign. Let me do that again. Room off is going to allow you to turn off a certain room. And this is going to do the opposite of the select activity. It's going to run all the deselection events in a central location. You don't have to hard code the room. In our templates that are automatically programmed, when you hit that off button, if you're using Elegance, it'll pop up that turn off room. And on that room off command, there's a room off command, current room. There's also room off all rooms, okay? But that will start running all the deselection events in that centralized location. So you could do all rooms off too. Either or, okay? And that'll automatically tell System Manager, for whatever room you're in, to start running all the deselection events to turn off this system. Okay? There's a tag for that that's standard. Forget what it is. I think it's system:"room off. Yes. There you go. All right. Let's relabel that macro steps and continue. All right. There's source return. Now, this one is a really powerful feature because this will return you to a source device, but only if it'll only show up, at least that's the way we do it in System Manager now. On our templates, this command will only appear on, see this back layer? Let's find it. Source return back. Source return is here. Let's unlock that and take a look. Okay? What this is saying is only show up if source return is visible in a room. Now, why would that be? Because this is only going to show up, this back button, if you're on an other source type. So if your source type is video or audio, you're not going to see this back button. And what this back button is designed to do is take you back to your last in-use video or audio activity. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm on Elegance right now and I'm watching Roku. Okay? Now, I won't be able, this back button, even though it's here, will not show you, will not appear because that visible state will be true. Source returns visible when you're on an audio, when you're not on an audio or video source type. You have to be on an other source type. Okay? And so let's say I'm watching Roku And now I go to my lighting page on my let's do my IST10. I go to now that source return will show up. There it is right here in the viewport. Okay. But I'm not ready yet because now I'm going to jump to my climate control page on my IST10. And of course, this will still ring true. It'll show up because I'm still on another source type. And now I jump to my security page on my IST10. And now back will still show up because this is an other source type. And now if I click back, it'll take me all the way back to my Roku. Okay? So back to Roku. So source return, at least on our templates, is designed to get you back to your last audio or video source. Doesn't make sense to show it on a source type that has, let me just show you this. It doesn't make sense to do this on a video or audio source. So you're going to want to program a visible state layer. If you're in a one room, you only want to make this visible when System Manager use this source return visible. That means you're on a source type of other. Okay? And program that in. Okay? And there you go. Source return. Designed to get you back while you go and adjust some settings. All right. We're almost done here. Show lists menus. This is designed to pop up those menus on Elegance and Coral. On Elegance, these pop up. They literally pop up. So your room list pops up. So does your source list. So does your power list. On Coral, these just display. Okay? And so that room control is designed, that list control is designed to show your sources. Fixed menus is for Coral, show your rooms, show your power, but overlay menus are for Elegance. Show your sources because it overlays the interface. Show your rooms, show your sources. The great part about these is that if you show your power, the other ones in the family will go away. So if your sources were showing and you picked your power, the sources will go away, and rooms as well. Okay? Only one of these can show at once. You could also toggle them as well. Hide them all if they're all showing. There you go. Manage pop-ups. We have a separate video for that. We created it on our YouTube site. I'll go over it real quick. Let's say you create a pop-up for your client. Volume pop-up. I want to create a volume pop-up, and I want this pop-up to show up. Well, let's not program that yet, okay? Because I want this to show up every time I adjust volume. I want to pop up a volume level. And in here, I'm just going to bring in a tag for volume, which should auto-program with the volume level. So on this interface, whenever I hit volume up or volume down, I want this volume pop-up. Let's move this to that layer. I want this to normally look like this, but when I ramp volume up or down, I want it to pop up this, which gives me feedback for the volume. In fact, I could even make this go one step further. I could put a little slider underneath. Go to my bitmaps, go to my sliders. Let's make this inactive right now. Okay, and put a volume tag in there so it auto-programs that. So not only can I see my level, I could use a slider to adjust it. I have one here, so it's not going to be as common in Elegance, but if you're customizing, pretty cool feature. Okay, how do I make this work? Well, we give you a manage pop-up feature. And the way this works is, let's uncheck the volume bar so we can access it, is we give you on your, let's just do this for the family room. When the family room volume up is sent, I'm going to bring in a volume control. I'm going to bring in a manage pop-up command. Now, pop-ups can be controller specific or global. Controller specific means that's only going to pop up on that this volume pop-up's only going to pop up on this controller only, okay? Which is nice. We don't want to interrupt other controllers. Not with volume, at least, okay? So I'm going to use the controller specific. Now, for controller specific, we give you 3 different pop-up types. One of them is reserved for volume. You don't technically have to use volume, but why not? And now I could determine a duration, how long I want this to pop up. Let's say 2 seconds. And now, when I hit volume up, I can continuously send this, but 3 seconds later or 2 seconds later, this is going to go away, okay? Now, if you have a driver, you can, instead of saying no refresh device needed, I could pick the variable that should be impacted. TV, family room. I'm going to pick the volume variable. And what this will do is continuously leave that popped up for 2 seconds until I stop impacting the volume. So if I hit volume, and if I keep hitting volume for 10 seconds or keep adjusting the slider for 10 seconds straight, this is going to remain away. And now once that volume variable stops being impacted after 2 seconds of not being impacted, it'll go away. And you could use this for a variety of things. We have a video on our YouTube site that explains this feature in big detail, but that's the Manage Pop-ups feature. And that's the end of the bitmaps that are, the macro steps, I'm going a little loony, that are available in on our processor. Now, that's not all the macro steps. There's also special macro steps that are available in Standalone. Let's talk about Standalone. Standalone, only some remotes support Standalone. And Standalone allows you to fire a command directly from a controller, okay? So the ISR2 is capable of Standalone. As we know from our classes, only the controller, level macros can be set to Standalone. And once I set this to Standalone, I could see all my Standalone devices. I don't have any right now. So I could send out an IR command from a Standalone device. Let's show this in true form. Let's add a Standalone device. I'm going to add a subwoofer. Maybe I can't get a subwoofer in my family room. Let's go with a Velodyne. Okay? I'll go with this is pretty, let's go with something with a little more phase control. Let's do this one. I'm going to go with the Velodyne Optimum series. Put that in my family room. Problem is, can't get an emitter to it. Okay? So instead of specifying an emitter port, I'm going to make this Standalone. And I'm going to give this a name called subwoofer. Okay? And whether or not I create pages, I don't really need a page for it. But now that device is Standalone. How does this work? Let's go back to our macro steps, at least for the ISR2. Now, right now I can see all my sources, but I don't see my subwoofer. It's not in here. These are only the system commands. That is, commands I could send over the processor. Once I toggle this to Standalone, now I can see my subwoofer commands. So I could send like a phase command, maybe set a phase 180, and that'll come directly from the remote. Now you might notice that our macro steps have been trimmed down a lot. Only some of these are available in Standalone. And you might get an extra command. You actually do. One called button test. Button test will only work in Standalone, and you could do 2 things. You can execute an if-else statements if a button is held down for a specific time. So let's say I hold down the button for 2 seconds. I want this to send a phase of 180. Otherwise, I just want the button to send a phase of 90. So normally, this button will send a phase of 90 unless I hold it down for 2 seconds. If you don't like that, you could also use double click. So I could say if the button is double clicked before 1 second, you have to have some time duration because if someone's going button crazy, you don't want them to keep toggling this. If a button is double-clicked before a second, within a second, then do the same thing. Either or, and that's available in Standalone. Okay? I think I covered everything, and that's our macro steps. So to summarize, macro steps are those powerful tools that you could use to customize your macros, either for solving problems, dealing with problematic devices or stubborn devices, or creating a wonderful client experience. That's all we have today. Thanks so much for watching.